I would be willing to bet that at least 85 to 90% of y'all who believe Richard Allen is guilty had no idea about this particular piece of information that came out at trial, because this wasn't something widely reported in the press. You had to follow the actual daily recaps from several attorneys to understand what was going on. But if timing is everything, and timing was a key factor in Richard Allen being found guilty according to the state, this absolutely blows all that out of the water. The state's case is wrong. The state's case is inaccurate, and this is proof. And this is proof nobody talked about in the mainstream press. So this is from Defense Diaries. I'm not going to give away everything they talked about in this live. You should certainly go listen to it from start to end. But if what we're going to talk about right here from the defense's cell phone expert doesn't change your mind, then honestly, I don't know what to tell you. Maybe get on your knees, do some praying, do some soul searching, because you're wanting a conviction, you're wanting a name, and you're not wanting justice.
Here's what I want you to do. Would you just pretend that you're on the stand and I'm Jennifer Auger, and I've just asked you what your finding was with respect to what you found in the database, which Cecil didn't know how to read. He claims he saw it, but he didn't know what it meant. So it's really the bombshell evidence in the case. Just kind of reenact that for us in terms of what your testimony was.
Yeah, I think that came up under the, do you disagree with some of the findings? Mm-hmm. And this was towards the end of it. And I said, this information is on his timeline, but it's incomplete. It states right there on his timeline at 5:45 p.m. local time, there was an aux input cable inserted. And then later on his timeline, I don't know if he had it, but the removal is logged as 10:32 p.m.
And just so we're all on the same page, if that phone had actual water damage, then it would have indicated somewhere within the report that the phone was received with water damage. It would have indicated somewhere in that file download that the phone had water damage. None of that was available. None of that was said. There was nothing within the evidence, according to the defense, and honestly, according to the state, that this phone had water damage. At least up until this particular point. Nothing in the data, nothing in the reports. And according to the state, they said Richard Allen supposedly did what he did. He was spooked by a van, and then he left the scene never to return. So who is plugging in headphone cords in that phone? Because if the state is right, it certainly wasn't Richard Allen. And I just don't see how people can say the state is right if the evidence points to something else. It just doesn't make sense to me. I'm not understanding it. I believe people are seeing what they want to see just because they feel more safer thinking that law enforcement never gets anything wrong.
And that was just part of going through his timeline of events and the timeline of events that I could see on my side and figuring out what the heck was happening.
And correct me if I'm wrong, there is absolutely no way to misconstrue, like that. It's literally in the report, aux in. So it's not like he was like, oh, I don't know what that means.
So for me to view that, I had to export the database out of my forensic tool, yes, and then open it and view it with the database viewer. And then I had to go all the way down to the very right. It was like, I don't know, 4,000 columns to the right at the very end. I'm exaggerating, but it's a lot of columns. And it said right there in English words, raw data, aux input cable in and out. Like I didn't have to take any extra steps to decode it, convert it, or anything like that. It was just right there in plain English in the database. You just had to take the extra step and look at it.
And he did identify that he actually saw that. He just claimed to not know what it meant. Isn't that
right?
So, so my point is, there's no way for him not to know what that meant based on you just said in plain English. It said
they were aware of this.
In
right.
So,
wow.
I don't think he looked at it. I don't think he went that far.
Honestly, I know everybody likes to say sometimes law enforcement does these things and says these things on the stand so they have plausible deniability, but not looking isn't an answer. Those two victims deserve justice. That town deserved a fair trial. That town deserved to understand what happened that day, and honestly, I don't believe they did. Individuals are saying this is justice. He did it. There's justice for the victims. This town needs to move on. I just strongly disagree with what you're saying. There's no way this investigation can have this many inconsistencies and people actually believe there was legitimate justice. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. And if you have a valid explanation for what they're talking about, let me know down in the comments below. I'm not unreasonable and I'm not going to block you.
Because you have to take that extra step and manually look at it or do a lot of
Except
scrolling.
I thought he said that he actually saw it but didn't know what it meant or something.
Yeah,
like that.
he testified that the research wasn't complete or something like that. It was like this mystery code, and so he didn't have an opinion about it.
That's because he was looking in the wrong column of that row. He didn't look far enough over.
Okay.
I mean,
I was taking it more, that he was intentionally leaving out evidence that would have contradicted the state's theory.
I don't know.
like massively contradicted the state's theory,
Right.
like destroyed their entire theory of the case.
Oh, there's this bizarre code. I don't know what it means.
What does it mean, Augs in?
Exactly. Both these things cannot be true. Now, I get it. People are going to say, this is a defense expert. She's clearly lying. She's clearly biased. And I understand where you're coming from. But I'm of the belief if an expert gets on the stand and they're just completely incredible and they don't know what they're doing, it's going to be called out by the state. And most rational people are going to say, yeah, I get it. They have no idea what they're talking about. They're just a paid shill from the defense. But that just isn't the case here. Nobody was running stories saying she wasn't credible. They were just overlooking this particular piece of evidence. They didn't necessarily report on the backstory for how the state came to the determination that they came to. But you're going to hear it right here. You're going to hear it in a minute.
So, because, I mean, my problem with Cecil in terms of just his either inability to maybe do a little bit of research to figure out what it meant if he did in fact find it, because I don't know if I necessarily believe that he did see it. I think that it may have come to his attention after he read your report. Is what I think may be the case.
Well, I didn't write a report. We didn't have time.
There you go.
And so I got hammered on that. But he did have in his written report where he was looking at that entry and he said one column, if it says, it might say 01 and it might mean this or that, but I don't really know.
So there really was
He
another
definitely
column.
laid eyes on it.
Yeah, but he didn't look at all of it.
We're
some of
assuming
it.
he didn't look at all of it. Or
Wow,
he might
I don't
have-
know.
Right,
Based
he
on
might
his
have.
written report and his testimony that I saw, he looked at this much when he should have looked at this much.
That makes it so much worse.
Or he looked at that much and decided that he was just going to write about this much. One of the two.
I don't know.
I mean, it's like that kind of plausible deniability that he was able to kind of put out there at trial was like stunning to me. So
The big takeaway here, regardless of what they're trying to say, is he didn't look at all the evidence. And one thing it is important to note, Baldwin has spoken as if he believed Cecil was trying to do the right thing. He did the best job he could. And Baldwin's railed against several members of law enforcement, but this particular individual, he hasn't. So I get that they're clowning him a little bit, and that's fine. Everybody's got their own personal opinion. But I'll go on and say I haven't seen, read, or heard anything from Richard Allen's defense pointing a finger at this guy and calling him incompetent. They just say he did the best he could. They believe he did the best they could, and they're moving on to other stuff.
as you sit in now, I want to talk a little bit about the Cecil search, which is what all of us call it these days.
Honestly, before they talk about the Cecil search, the plausible deniability from several members of law enforcement absolutely blew my mind. And I want everybody to understand, when I was listening to the recaps of this particular trial, I was listening to it from the perspective of individuals who believe Richard Allen is guilty, and I was listening to recaps from individuals who had doubt when they were just trying to be fair and unbiased and talk about both sides. So I didn't get just one piece of information. I didn't get one-sided information. I listened to opposing views. I listened to as many views as possible. And at the end of it, I came to the determination that Richard Allen, for sure, 100%, regardless of whatever you believe, did not get a fair trial. And I also believe he wasn't guilty of the crimes he was charged with. That's just my take. You can feel free to disagree at any point.
So you're in the middle of this intense direct examination, this bombshell kind of like and I'm sitting there in the gallery, like watching, and Andrea was sitting there too. And when this thing kind of hits, when it takes hold and just drops into the courtroom, and And I can see I'm watching Nick Mcleland's face, like very, very carefully. So, and it just so happens that they find that that was a really good time to take a break. We're going to take a break right now. And I see Mcleland talking to both Cecil and I think it was Holman pretty intently in that moment in time. And now we all started to file out of the courtroom. We come back 15 minutes later. Lo and behold, I think you were done, correct? Because
yes, I was done right after the break.
At that point. So at that point, that was it. Like they called it for that evening in terms of whether or not they're going to put anybody else on. But somehow Cecil gets back on that stand because I didn't think that they ended their case in chief until the following morning. So I'm
probably rebuttal. Oh no, the defense called him so that they couldn't have time to right because he didn't want him to have that extra time to come up with
overnight.
Something.
Right, exactly. So that's exactly what happened. So they call Cecil up to the stand, and then he says, "Oh, okay, yeah, I went out during the break and I Googled it."
How the hell is a Google search allowed to come into the testimony? That's literally the same thing as individuals walking into a hospital and saying they need open heart surgery because they saw it on WebMD. I mean, this is the dumbest, most biased crap I have ever heard of. And to give you an example of the bias, Judge Bev, who everybody believes, and I believe to a large degree, is biased against Karen Reed, even she sat there on record when something came up about one of these hearings and an individual said something about Google. She said, "You are not Googling stuff on the record. That is not happening." I mean, even Judge Bev acknowledges Google is not a valid form of evidence and testimony. That's what we have experts for. That's why everybody pays for experts. But no, not in Delphi. Not in Judge Gull's courtroom. A Google search is a legitimate thing. I'll never get it. I'll never understand it. And I dare anybody who is watching this video right now to justify that. I dare you.
If there's something that could cause like a false positive on a headphone jack on an iPhone, and then he says, "Yeah, and I found it like right away." Auger objects. There's some back and forth, like in terms of where it came from, and I mean, when I Googled it, like after I stepped out of the courtroom, 25 minutes later, and I got it, and it was some Apple, like tech
Apple
group thing. Yeah, Apple discussion group. It wasn't even like Apple. And I see, and so he testifies that either water or dirt can cause a false positive, to show up on the phone in terms of, but and you don't have any time at that point in terms of like to put you back on to try to rebut him because you don't have the ability to be able to do it. So like, what is going through your mind in that moment of time when he gets up there and just like says stuff with no real?
Was she like, still there? You were gone.
Seeing a lot of Ipsy Dixit in the Reed case, and that was like a massive case of Ipsy Dixit right there, which basically is Latin for he just said shit without any kind of real substantial behind it. So like, what are you thinking at that moment in time?
So I was sitting in the courtroom watching Mr. Cecil have his questions from Jennifer, and he says I Googled it, and then she comes back so hot. I was a little bit scared myself when she was asking him, and I was on her side. I'm like, man, that's just not how we don't do it. We just don't rely on a Google search. We don't rely on Wikipedia. That's not how we're trained. That's not how we teach people. You rely on forensic and accredited studies and research. But, if it's accredited research, that's the best thing. You go to your peers, that's the second best. You do your own research and meticulously document it, that's the third best thing. But
nothing
Google...
nothing he learned from Google, even assuming it was right, has any bearing on what the extraction report would read. Is that accurate?
Right. What you see and experience on your phone doesn't necessarily log like you think it might.
And there you have it. What more do y'all need to see? Nothing in this video touches on the Brad Weber inconsistencies and the footage found showing his van arriving at a time that throws the state's case off. I mean, I am fair. This is an open discussion channel. Feel free to disagree, but I'm just not saying it. I don't see how anybody can be rational and objective and still say Richard Allen committed this crime. Let me correct that. I believe absolutely everybody who only followed the mainstream press in this particular story believes Richard Allen is guilty. So if you are one of those individuals who only got their information from a mainstream source, I get it. Just let me know in the comments. Just put in the comments, I followed these legacy sites and I believe Richard Allen is guilty, and I will point you to several other individuals who actually gave fair and unbiased coverage. In fact, 2 of them are in this video. Go to their channels. You can go to Lawyer Lee. I mean, there is plenty out there who give fair, unbiased coverage and let you hear all the facts. Now, if you heard all the facts and you still believe Richard Allen is guilty, then God save you, you need Jesus. But if you enjoyed this and a more fair, open conversation, maybe check one of these videos out. Y'all be safe now.